Welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Schoolhouse. So there's a lot going on with the movement to fix our society. I think a lot of us have realized that the modern world is very broken. It's not a world that we actually want to live in. And we want to go back to, strong families and close bonds between, kids and parents and grandparents and really take our society back to the traditional way of living. Because what I've come to understand in my own journey and understanding this is a lot of what this show is my own journey of discovering the truth, whether it's the true medicine, the true culture, true history, etc. One of the big things, though, is the truth about education and how to educate our children. And I'm someone that didn't have kids until my 30s, and it has completely transformed my life. Like, I think that being a father is the greatest joy I could have ever imagined in my life. And I love it so much that my wife and I are going to be homeschooling our kids, and we're going to be doing everything that we can do to fix where the society is heading. Because if you look at the controllers and the people that are, kind of running a lot of the world that's been corrupted, they're these very elite bloodlines that are very specific about the education of their children. They maintain their bloodlines. They're very selective. And I think that what we need to have happen is this massive movement of good people like you and I that basically outbreeding the bloodlines, right? How can we create so many good children and raise them well so that in one or two generations, we're now these kids and their kids are running the world instead of these elite satanic bloodlines. Like, I'd love to see that happening. But a lot of it starts with education. And so my guest today, Mr. Robert Bortins, is the CEO of Classical Conversations. So Classical Conversations is a pretty significant Christian-based homeschool curriculum. They got over 100,000 students in, I think, over 60 countries. But what they're doing is things like teaching kids Latin by 4 years old, or by by seventh grade, I think, as what he said, that kids could literally draw a world map from memory. I mean, these are things that are astounding. I mean, I went to public school and went to art school, and like, I was lucky that I was tying my shoes by high school, right? So the conversation today is going to be looking at the education system, where it went off, what were the classical ways of educating children, and how we can get back to that. In the same way that we're looking, how do we get back to the medicine that was really around before the Rockefellers came in and, bought it all up and created this modern medical industrial complex. We're going back to that traditional medicine. Let's also go back to the traditional way of educating our children. So folks, I hope you enjoy this interview with Robert Bortins. Imagine a future where your wealth is untouchable. A future where every decision you make today creates a foundation of security for tomorrow. Right now, optimism fills the air. A new chapter under Trump is beginning and opportunities seem endless. Markets are climbing, spirits are high. But beneath the surface, whispers of change grow louder. Policies, tariffs, and global shifts are shaping a new economic landscape. The US dollar holds strong, but what happens when the world questions its place, which is already happening? What happens when nations turn away from the familiar and toward the uncertain? Gold is different. For centuries, it has been an anchor in the times of change, a hedge against inflation, a shield against volatility, a sanctuary when the world feels unsteady. Gold doesn't follow the tides. It remains steadfast, unyielding, and enduring. Close your eyes and imagine your wealth secure. Imagine your future unshaken. This is the promise of gold, a tangible investment free from the whims of politics and markets. The time to act is now. While optimism reigns and markets soar, remember that true wisdom comes from preparing for what others cannot see. Gold is not just an investment, it is your anchor, your protection, your legacy. Take the first step towards securing your future. And there's no better company to work with than Noble Gold. Protect your future. Act now. Call 626-654-1906 or visit goldwithseth.com to get your free gold and silver investment guide. Again, that's 626-654-1906 or goldwithseth.com. Mr. Robert Bortins, it is great to have you on the show. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Seth, just great to be here and just enjoying the holiday season.
It's a lovely time. Actually, I appreciated your Twitter post about the Christmas parades and how Christmas parades as a parent are very different than when you're not a parent, when you're just, complaining about traffic and everything. But then, you enter into the parade season, and that one time that Santa looks at your kid and waves, and seeing your kid gasp. I really appreciated that. So it's a beautiful season with children for sure.
Yeah, being a parent is a whole new world and just an opportunity for us to mature as believers and as just adults and seeing life in a totally different manner. And that's just something that these people who are, not having kids and doing all these crazy things will miss out on and regret later in life.
I agree. And so, how many kids do you have?
We have three kids. Our oldest will be 10 before the year turns. That's our daughter Lily, and we got two boys, Trey, who just turned 8, and Jonah, who's 4.5. My in-laws call him Jonah the Destroyer. So,
Yeah. So I've got a 4.5-year-old, girl that she's our oldest, and yeah, I'd say she's also the destroyer and the mess maker, and then we've got a 10-month-old, a little baby Grace. So we've got June and Grace, and
oh
it's quite the adventure, and it's funny because you mentioned the people that don't have kids, and because I was at I had my first child when I was I'm in my mid 30s, right? So
yeah,
I started later than a lot of parents traditionally would. I guess these days it's more common. And, all through my 20s and early 30s, I thought, oh, it's okay. I don't really need to have kids. And it wasn't like a major goal of mine. And I realized that it's people that say that have no idea what it's like to have children. And, some people can't have kids and they make it's a very conscious decision not to. And I respect that. However, I can say for myself being, not having kids and not really seeing the value of it to now being a father, like I wish I could go back in time and I could marry my wife at 21 and we'd have 10 kids by now. Like that would be like what I find is just that kids are just like the greatest wealth. Like they're this little slice of heaven when you look into them and see them growing, and it's like it's the most amazing thing in the world to see this little creature that just loves you, and of course they test your patience, but I think that the people that think that, oh, it's not going to add that much value, it's like you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I got married when I was 30 and we started having kids right away. So now I have friends that have 18-year-olds that are my age and I'm like, "Oh man, that would be so nice." I still got, 8 years or 14 years with our youngest, which is fun and exciting, but definitely wish I could go back and start earlier because you definitely get limited on the number of kids you can have the later you start in life. And oh yeah, I mean it's just the greatest wealth possible. It's wealth that will outlive any bank account or your own life and just propagate down through the generations. And so, a lot of these people who, obviously, some people can't have kids and that's tragic and the Lord has his reasons, but for the people choosing not to, I think that they're gonna wake up one day and realize that the world's ways are not God's ways, and that believing kind of this modern society's, don't have a kid or just have one kid, is gonna be highly lacking later in life for them.
I agree. The positive thing that I'm seeing is it appears that there is a reversal of these trends, the trends that kind of, took root, and, hey, women should be at work and they should be working and let the government raise your children, and you don't need to have kids. It's, kind of like this kind of modern construct that they've been pushing with us, which is, has a lot of Marxist roots, and, I
Yep.
think big picture depopulation agendas and population collapse, which I'm happy to see Elon talk about that pretty often. He's oftentimes raising the kind of awareness of, hey, like the population of this country, like say Japan, for instance, they're collapsing. I know China, it's a big issue for them. Their population's collapsing because they're not replacing. They're not hitting that 2 point whatever the exact number you have to hit to actually make sure your
Hmm.
population's expanding. So it's a real issue, but I also feel that same with homeschooling, alternative medicine, alternative media, that there's this massive shift that's going back to the traditional, going back to the place where there's, like though I'm not a fan of like the trad wife trend, which is, these kind of
Right.
pinup doll looking traditional wife baking pies. It's like, okay, it's a little bit, the traditional wife isn't on Instagram, like in some low
No.
cut, like apron cooking pies for her husband, right? Um, but it's still a positive move in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of joke around sometimes is let the pagans, not have kids and let's have, Christians have big families because they can just breed out that worldview over, the next 20 or 40 years. We just have to be smart enough not to send our children to the pagans to be educated in this depopulation. I mean, it's really it's a poverty mindset. It's not a thriving mindset. It's not a flourishing mindset. And you just see, depression at an all-time high among our youth, suicide at an all-time high among our youth. They have identity crisis. They don't know if they're a boy or a girl. They can't look down and see what God gave them anymore because of what they're teaching in these woke school systems. And it's not just have kids, don't just be fruitful and multiply, but raise them up right. And I think the one silver lining in COVID was that these experts, they're fake papers that say they knew something. It was revealed that they didn't. That it was just a group of people patting each other on the back who are $2 trillion in student loan debt and lying to us about the origins of certain diseases, lying to Americans about climate change and the effects of human population, and you know just really putting these ideas into these most innocent children's heads, that just being on this planet, that they are harming other people, and we're not surprised when you see the effects of this, and it's tragic.
It really is. It really is. And so I know that you're a pioneer in the homeschooling space. You were like, luckily, your parents homeschooled you. I know that your mother is very much so a pioneer in the education system, and she's doing a lot as relates to education, or at least what I could gather from her Twitter profile and what she's
Yeah.
talking about. And I thought, okay, it makes sense that you're her son, and you, as you say in your Twitter bio, from homeschooler to homeschool, right? Or wait, was it you were homeschooled to homeschooler, right? Like you were
Yes.
you were homeschooled, and now you're doing that, but you're not just a parent that's homeschooling. You've built an entire curriculum, right? So classical conversations, which is you're the CEO of Classical Conversations, which is, if I remember correctly, it's you've got over 100,000 students nationwide, like 135,000 or so students that are homeschooling using this curriculum. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I was homeschooled the whole way through high school. Went and got an industrial engineering degree at Clemson University. At that time, my mom started classical conversations in our basement when I was in high school. And after kind of climbing the corporate ladder for 6 years, I came on board and started helping out with the family business. At that time, we were in about 40 states with about 45,000 students. And now, been running it for over 10 years now, and we're in 60 countries, working on
Wow.
translating our curriculum into uh, three foreign languages. And we're of course, in all 50 states with local communities, with a classical pedagogy. That means in a Christian worldview. And so it's not to your traditional homeschooling. We form groups that meet once a week, and you get with a trained parent tutor, so it's the students and you, the parent, in there, typically in groups of 8 to 12, just learning together, having fun, and using a proven curriculum.
And so I find that what's happening now is that whether it's again medical or media or education, that it seems like around the turn of last century, right, early 1900s. Like let's look at the medical and industrial complex as an example. I
Yeah.
just did an interview recently with a guy talking about silver, and in the early 1900s, silver was the number one prescribed antibiotic. Yet when
Mm.
Rockefeller came in, and they couldn't patent silver as an antibiotic because it was also a currency and it had all these other things. So they couldn't patent it. So what they did is they actually had these other antibiotics they brought in, and then they demonized and basically erased the history of silver as being an antibiotic, right? So even the idea of being fed with a silver spoon, it was actually what they found was
Mm.
the families that during the Black Plague, for instance, that ate with silver were much less likely to die from the Black Plague because that silver is a natural antibiotic. And so
Yeah.
I think that's a good analogy for what's happening across the board and education specifically. Grand Canyon University, a private Christian university in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, believes that we're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. GCU believes in equal opportunity and that the American dream starts with purpose. GCU equips you to serve others in ways that promote humans flourishing and to create a ripple effect of transformation for generations to come. By honoring your career calling, you impact your family, your friends, and your community. Change the world for good by putting others before yourself to glorify God. Whether your pursuit involves a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree, GCU's online, on campus, and hybrid learning environments are designed to help you achieve your unique academic, personal, and professional goals. With 350 academic programs as of June 2024, GCU meets you where you are and provides you a path to help you fulfill your dreams. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Let it flourish. So find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. It's private, Christian, and affordable. So folks, visit gcu.edu. Again, that's gcu.edu. You look back at our education system, and it's like at some point, someone else hijacked what education was in America. And if you go back and, my family, we love watching Little House on the Prairie as one of our, kind of
Yeah.
core, if we're going to watch a show together, it's oftentimes that. And you see the curriculum then was very different than what it is now. And so, but what's also, you're probably familiar with, I forget his last name, John Gatto, I think
Yeah,
he's,
John Gatto. Yep. Yep. He was a
yeah.
public school teacher in New York, public school teacher of the year, and then he wrote a book about how how corrupt the whole system is.
Yeah, but also what he's done, 'cause my wife has followed a lot of his work and she's explained it to me, and I've watched a little bit of what he's done, is he's showing actually here's what they're teaching kids in the very elite private schools. They're not teaching DEI and critical race theory. They're teaching them the arts, the classical literature, painting, like very advanced things, the appreciation of classical music. So they've preserved
Yeah.
that old culture for themselves. But while they've taken, the more kind of the mainstream people, the people that can't afford to send their kids to some private school that costs $80,000 a year, and so they've given us something else, similar to again medicine, everything else. So with classical conversations and with your curriculum, how far back, like what are you basing the curriculum on? What are the things that the kids are studying in that are different than what they're going to learn? Obviously, you're not teaching them, transgender ideology and,
No.
activists, BLM type stuff. But what are the core tenets that you've come to and that your company and your mother have come to in terms of what does a true classical education look like for a child?
Yeah, so I mean, there's two things. One, we use the classics, reading original, works, studying, classical music, classical art, those type of things. But we take it a little bit differently. So our main focus is giving these students the skills to learn anything. And in that process, which we call the classical method, there's first the grammar where you learn the, basic tenets of something. So a lot of people think of grammar as English grammar, but there's grammar of dribbling a basketball where you're going to put it on your fingers. There's grammar in baking where you need to know what 1 teaspoon is versus 1 tablespoon. So grammar is the first thing we teach in kindergarten through 6th grade. We start as with 4-year-olds doing Latin, teaching them geography. We do what we call a weekly presentation with the kids. So you're going through all the 6 main subjects as well as science experiments and learning the scientific method as a 5-year-old, for example. And then we'd go dialectic, which is kind of the logic stage, and that's more the middle school, early high school stage, where you take all of these, grammar things that you've learned, and then you start applying them and putting them together, starting to read books like, Johnny Tremaine, starting to do things like mock trial, debate, starting to read, rich literature. We have our students in 7th grade learn, they draw the world from memory. That's kind of the highlight at the end of the year. They have an hour, a 16 by 24 piece of paper, and they draw as many things as they can in that hour. And typically a student's going to draw the entire world and identify somewhere over, 2, 3, 400 different parts in the world. So It's just we believe that at least as Christians that we are, sons and daughters of the Most High, and if our kids are prince and princesses in the kingdom of God, they deserve a kingly education. And it's not $60,000 a year to homeschool. Our programs anywhere from about $800 a year for kindergarten through third grade to about just under $2,000 a year when you purchase all the books and all the sorts of things for our high school program. And so it's very different. They're reading the Aeneid, the Iliad. They're translating the Vulgate. That's one of the things that they do their senior year, and they do a senior thesis. So they spend all year, to write a 20 to 50 page senior thesis, and then they defend it at the end of the year, typically in front of, 4 or 5 judges. And so most people don't see that type of education until they're getting a master's degree. And so, it's really not that our students are achieving more than what they would have, 100 or 200 years ago. It's that our society expects so much less of students. I took one of the interesting things about me, I'm the oldest of 4 boys. And so, my mom was a homeschooling pioneer, but she didn't necessarily have all the answers the first time through. And my youngest brother is 15 years younger than me. And so we actually created our high school program first. And then my mom said, well, what gaps did, Robert have and these other students have? And then created our, elementary school program, our grammar school program, filling in those gaps. So when I came on as a, 26-year-old after working in the corporate environment and getting my degree, I actually enrolled myself into our grammar school, or we call it our foundations program in our essentials program, and actually sat there with 8 12-year-olds on a weekly basis doing the work with them and writing the papers. And it was pretty funny because my now wife, my fiance at the time, she was in getting her master's degree in athletic administration. And so she was writing these 10 or 12 page papers. And I was like, I got to write this 1 page paper. There's this 12-year-old girl who's a much better writer than me in my class. And, I learned more, in that one year than I did in my whole entire college career about writing. And so, quite frankly, our, homeschooling, as sixth graders, probably most kids could go into college and, pass most of those classes. Now, they don't have the maturity and experience to really thrive in that type of environment, but as far as the level of education they're getting, I mean, I think well above their peers, and they're going to be the leaders of the next generation. So I'm excited about just the number of students that are graduating now on an annual basis.
It's incredible. It's funny hearing you mention it. For one, I'm thinking like, oh, it's how funny it would be to imagine you as this 20-some-year-old man next to a 12-year-old in class, and like, okay, are you guys passing notes, or like, hey, no
I'm
no
cheating off
spitballs,
them.
right? Right. So, but it's also amazing that the seventh graders draw a world map. I mean, what you see, I'm not sure if you've seen this, but like a very common viral video you'll see floating around Twitter is that the people that are out interviewing college kids or whatever, and they'll ask them questions like, how many countries are there, or how many continents are there, or can you name
Mhm.
5 European countries? And they'll be like, 5 European countries, Berlin,
Yeah.
Sweden, and like they just give, and it's astounding how little they know. But you're right that they keep lowering the bar, like they keep lowering what it means to be proficient in reading. And I remember seeing some statistics that within some demographics that up to like half of them can't even read by high school, like, can't even qualify what they consider a kind of basic reading level, which is insane. But also hearing you talk about
Yes.
that, so I went to public school. Now, thankfully, I was in, I graduated high school in 2004, right? So I'm 38, and it was a public school, but it was out in the country, so it wasn't at that time overly woke. But I still didn't take a lot from it. Like, I spent most of my time, especially in high school, in the art room, and then ended up going to a private art school and studying industrial design, and that was my degree. And that's why, though I didn't learn a lot of the classics, I feel like the art room kept me out of the kind of the more social studies, and it kept me out of the more
Yeah.
woke stuff that they're bringing in. And somehow I left, a liberal arts, art school, with this mission to kind of fight and defeat communism, which was great. Obviously,
Nice.
God had a different plan for me than BLM and rioting and stuff. But it makes me think though that I wish I could go back and retrain myself because like my wife, who is a very good writer. She spent a lot of her life writing, and she's written a lot of the scripts that we use for the show production. She's like, I'll write something I think is really good. I'll say it to her, and she'll be like, oh, okay, let me edit it for you, right? And then she'll take it. So it's like I'm thinking, have you considered even going and creating adult programs, right? Because like as an adult, like I'd love to take a classical writing program where I could study for say an hour an evening once a week for a year, and actually retrain myself on how to properly write and structure language. Like I would love the opportunity to do that.
Well, yeah, so two things. One, at Classical Conversations, we always say we're redeeming two educations at once because even for us who are homeschooled, there was a lot of things we missed. And we don't charge the parents to redeem their education, but that's part of the process, and that's the beauty of homeschooling is you don't need to know it all. Just being an hour or a minute ahead of your kids, or even being able to humbly say, "Hey, I don't know this, but let's go research it together," and giving them those skills so when they don't know how to do something in the future, they know how to research it is huge. It is something that we're discussing internally. There's nothing on the 3-year roadmap necessarily for that, but it is we are having discussions about how we can, you know, package these into like a 8-hour course or different things. And we do have something called the Classical Learning Cohort, CLC. And it's for people who are enrolled in classical conversations, and it is I think I'm not sure exactly of the all the mechanics of it, but I think they get together weekly or bi-monthly, and they read some of these materials. And so we'll have one on Latin and one on writing and one on math. So there are some things that we're doing internally, but it is something that we'd love to spread out to the masses. Sometime in the not near future.
And so one thing I saw recently, which I thought was absolutely incredible, was some sort of information that had come out. They did some studies on homeschoolers, and they found that I think it was something you're probably way more familiar with this than me, but I think it was 2 in every 5 homeschooled students, like by the time they get to say high school age, are actually they own their own business. It was something about entrepreneurship and how like I think it was roughly 2 out of every 5 actually had either an online business of some sort or some sort of business, which is incredible because and that's something I find when I look back at my own education versus what I'm doing right now. So I was always an entrepreneur. I was just
Yeah.
kind of loved starting businesses and learning about that, and loved studying sales and negotiation and those kinds of things. And I look back and wish, gosh, why didn't someone teach me the life skills of negotiation and sales, right? Because like if you can learn to negotiate and close a sale, then you can do anything, right? But that was
Yeah.
absent in our schooling. And so, are you within this education? Is there any kind of segment or any kind of path that gets into entrepreneurship and everything? Because I think that the modern education system, one thing it doesn't do is create entrepreneurs. They want to create wage slaves. They want to train you to be able to go into a fluorescent lit office in a
Yeah.
cubicle and just raise your hand if you have a question for your boss. Like that's what they're training. They don't want entrepreneurs that are actually creating new businesses like what you're doing that challenge the status quo.
Yeah, I mean, they want you to be in debt up to your eyeballs so that you can't afford to quit your job that you hate because you're buying stuff that you don't need. So that's the system that we live in. And so yeah, I don't know exactly the numbers. I will tell you that a lot of entrepreneurial people do homeschool, just by the nature of giving up a full-time income. I think I would say probably 80% of the homeschoolers I know have some sort of side hustle, and they're bringing the kids into that and encouraging them to be entrepreneurs. We just at our own community, this isn't a part of our official curriculum, but a lot of communities have a Christmas fair. And so my wife and daughter and my son made a bunch of crafts and different Christmas things, hair berets, all sorts of different things to sell. And so my daughter sold about $250 worth of stuff over a 4-hour period here. And, we got together. It's like, okay, well, how much in materials did we make? You got to, pay mom back for that. And, how many hours did you work on this, and figuring all of those things out. And like you said, she's 9, almost 10 years old. I had different, worked growing up. That was one of the things that was awesome. I thought I wanted to be a computer engineer. So when I was 16 years old, we found a local engineering company that specialized in computer engineering and programming. I interned with them for 2 years. So by the time I got out, I knew I did not want to be a computer engineer, but I did want to do engineering, which college is expensive, and if you spend 2 years or 3 years of your life figuring out you don't want to do something, well, I mean, that's $100,000 or more you're in debt, and you're trying to switch majors. So, I mean, that's a real benefit of homeschooling, is just being able to try things out, and not having those missed opportunities, and those costs when, I mean, you're in a brick building 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. I think it's 16,000 hours that a student would be in a public school building, and that doesn't count bus rides and those type of things. So, I mean, it's just a colossal waste of time, and we know time is our most precious commodity. And you only get so much, and you can't buy any more of it. And so, it's again not surprising. Most homeschoolers, obviously, you're reading and doing other things, but typically maybe your nose is in a workbook. Maybe about 2 3 hours a day, and the rest of your time you're learning to live life with other people. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of folks are entrepreneurials, or are working in family businesses, and that's something that we need in our country, and something that big businesses don't necessarily like so much.
And so, obviously, I know that during COVID, there was a huge boom in the homeschooling industry, just because for a lot of reasons. One is a lot of parents were working from home. Their kids were also doing, school from home, so they're now able to see and listen in on a Zoom class and say, "Oh, wait, why? Like, this is what they're teaching you?" Like, and so
Mhm.
I know that I remember, back during, say 2021, 2022, et cetera, there you consistently see these, again, viral videos going around of a parent realize like, recording and seeing like, "Oh my gosh, this is what they're teaching my kid. Like, this is what the
Yeah.
education is," and that was enough for them to say, "Look, I'm pulling you out of public school, and we're gonna homeschool." But, beyond just, like, say, like, the COVID boom, are you seeing a shift happen? Are you seeing obviously, like you mentioned, you've grown the company from, say, 40,000, homeschooled kids in your curriculum to, well over 100,000. But are you seeing that there's actually much more of a trend where there's more and more interest in homeschooling and more people pulling away from not just the public school system, but even the private school system to realize that because we were going to send our kids to private school
Yeah.
initially, and now we're thinking, well, like let's just raise them, let's just homeschool because I work from home. I've got thankfully I've got a
Yeah.
studio at home and everything, so we're able to do that. But I think that there's a lot of parents that are also going that way. So are you seeing this same trend reflected in what, yeah, kind of your snapshot of the industry?
Yeah. So, prior to homeschooling or COVID, there was roughly 2.5 to 3 million homeschoolers in the United States. And of course, there's a lot of people schooling from home, but kind of that parent directed homeschooling saw somewhere between 5 and 6 million during COVID. And then, of course, there's a lot of people doing public school at home, and different things like that. And the big question we all had was, is it going to drop back down to 3 million homeschoolers afterwards? And I mean, for the most part, 95% of the people stayed, or so, some of the research has shown. And so, I mean, we're still around 4.5 million homeschoolers. I've seen research that suggests somewhere between 1 in 6 to 1 in 8 Gen Zers will have homeschooled for at least 1 year. And so, projecting out, what a lot of the research is showing is that, homeschooling is just becoming a normal choice for people. And so, with like my parents, it was kind of abnormal, and like, hey, we're homeschooling, we're doing it through high school. It's going to be more of, there's going to be those people, obviously, but it's going to be more like, okay, well, I'm going to send my kids to, you know, uh, elementary school at this public school because I like the teachers there and they go to our church. And I'm going to homeschool during middle school because I know that's kind of an awkward phase for people. And I'm going to send my kids to this Catholic private school for high school because of, whatever reason. And so you're going to see a lot more, I think, just parents bouncing around and choosing different systems. I think as there are more people working from home and, these kind of woke ideologies that are even, Donald Trump's not going to be able to rid them of, rid these out of our systems because they're inherent. I mean, they're in this teachers' colleges. So, even the best Christian teachers are being fed this woke garbage for 4 years at university, and it seeps into their ideology even if they don't realize it. So, um, and for private schools, they're getting that same woke teacher. So you can have a private school that might be teaching those might be trying to teach different things, but they have that same philosophy. So a lot of parents are choosing homeschooling, and I think we'll continue to see it grow. I mean, I don't know if on an annual basis the number is going to go up 10-20% a year like it had been for a long time, but I think we'll continue to steadily see it rise. And as it just becomes like my generation, where I'm homeschooling, my kids will probably, hopefully homeschool one day. And so, since we're the people having babies and raising them up inside of a family environment, it makes sense that throughout the generations, we'll reclaim education from the government.
And it's interesting to think about. I'm not sure. Have you seen the movie Idiocracy?
Yeah, yeah. I think I've referred to it a few times over the last 5 years.
Well, and
It
so
wasn't a playbook, people. I just want to tell the left that wasn't a playbook.
so just for those people who haven't seen it, the idea is that if you look at what they're doing, the kind of premise of that movie is that it's actually it's the less intelligent people that breed the most, right? Whereas it shows these highly intelligent kind of like the scholarly couple that, well, we're not ready for a child yet because of these conditions, and and so they end up having one kid or zero kids, whereas on the more kind of lower income, kind of less intelligent, they're just creating babies like en masse, and so what they're doing is they're taking that, which I think is probably actually not that far from reality, that you have, families that, like the really kind of wealthy people that are really sophisticated. Maybe they'll have one or two children, and that's enough. Whereas
Yeah.
you'd have these, families that a woman might have, six different children from two different dads or three different dads, and it's more common, right? And I don't know the exact statistics, but the idea of the movie is that let's take that and let's extrapolate out across 200 years and what happens to society, and society becomes a bunch of idiots, right? But
Mhm.
the idea, which is this is what's great, is what seems like what's happening is that it's not necessarily these Ivy Leaguers, these highly intelligent. Those are the ones that are, I think, in a lot of ways, completely bought into the woke agenda and climate change and the World Economic Forum agendas and UN, et cetera. But I think what you do have is you have this very faith-based middle class, kind of broad spectrum, middle, upper middle, lower middle, et cetera, that are realizing the same things I'm coming to. It's like, wow, like I want to repopulate the earth with good children and raise them well. So I hope that what we can do is create the inverse of idiocracy, where all these, Ivy League, these highly intelligent people, like they're kind of, we're breeding them out. You have this middle class of, families that are homeschooling, they're going back to classical education, very faith based, and, they're just having tons of kids. And I know a lot of people I'm, friends with and connecting with in, the overall, kind of morally conservative movement. People, like, it's not uncommon to see, like, look at Pete Hegseth. He's got what,
Yeah.
like 11 kids or something? I forget what the exact number is. I
He's
saw
got
a
a lot.
picture of him recently. I was like, "Whoa!" Like, that's what we need more of as an example. Like, let's just outbreed the Marxists.
Yeah, you got to outbreed them and then don't send them to the Marxist indoctrination centers called public schools for their education. And yeah, I think the Ivy Leagues, those they're overeducated at this point. When you've got Supreme Court justices that graduated from there that can't identify what a woman is, you've kind of lost the point of higher education. And so it's an unfortunate side product of Marxism that happens. So yeah, I mean you do have people who put their wealth, they can put it in money that is inflated away by our government. Our buying power. If you got I was looking at today, $100, 40 years ago would buy you 16 tickets to the movies, and now you can barely get 3 tickets for that. So, you can, invest in things that, the world's gonna whittle away, or you can invest in true wealth, generational wealth, that is going to, just, take your bloodline, through the generations. So, um, yeah, so these types of people who've been overeducated are gonna have, their bloodline end, and, quite frankly, can't be soon enough.
Yeah, I agree. Um, and so what do you say? Because I know that there's a lot of parents, like, when I've talked to, different friends and everything about homeschooling, it's a mix, it's a mixed bag, but one of the common things that I hear, well, there's actually 2 things I hear for the parents that choose to not homeschool. They say, "Well, I went to public school and I'm okay." Right? It's like, "Okay, so we'll address that." But the other thing is, "Well, I want them to socialize, like, I want them to learn the social skills of being around other kids." So what would you say if you're talking to a parent and they're like, "I don't wanna homeschool because I went to public school and I'm okay now, look at me, and B, I want my kid to be socialized." How would you, come back to that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, praise God that we're all okay. I would say maybe need some more self-reflection, and of course, we don't understand the opportunity cost, and so while we are blessed to be where we are, and I'm sure you did turn out okay. The schools today are way different than they were 20, 30 years ago when you were in it. The woke ideology was just springing forth at that point. It hadn't fully integrated itself into the system. We've see 70% of school age children in public school don't read at grade level. They're spending, 12 years, $18,000 a year in school, and can't read. That's not somewhere where I would, risk sending my kid. Yeah, it's not your school system anymore that you remember. And as far as socialization, of course, we've had to, you know, uh, talk about this ever since I was a little kid, and it's the research now actually shows the exact opposite. Homeschoolers as adults, now that we've have a few decades under our belt, are actually more civically minded, more social, have more friends, are doing more things in society than the average U.S. citizen and the public schooler. So, because if you think about a public school, my wife taught in public school for 10 years. Uh, she saw 30 students a day and saw an hour and had 6 classes. So she saw, about 180 to 200 kids a day. Uh, as an adult, when are you in a room with 30 people that are your exact same age, from your exact same set of zip codes? Almost never. And so, forcing people into a room by age is no form of socialization. And really, that's a low view of humanity. Animals can be socialized. We want our kids to be civilized. And so we don't even have the goal of socialization in homeschooling. We have the goal of expanding upon and improving civilization. And those are two different things. And so, if you shoot for the stars and you land on the moon, it's kind of like if you shoot for raising civilized adults, they'll definitely be socialized. And yeah, the government's own research now shows that homeschoolers are more socialized than everyone else. And if you really think about it, like I was forced to learn how to make friends because I didn't have someone sitting next to me, 8 hours a day, or an hour in this class and an hour in that class. I had to learn how to introduce myself and make friends growing up, and so those skills are lost in today's swipe right societies, and everything's online and those type of things. So. Now you just kind of flip that question on your head, is like, you send your kids to public school, how do you plan on getting them socialized?
Yeah, well, even the whole idea of socialize, it's like a socialize, socialism,
So
it's kind of like the
yeah.
group collective, and you make a good point because as I mentioned before, we watch, Little House on the Prairie a lot, and, within that show, they go to the schoolhouse, and you'll have, every episode, when they're in the schoolhouse, you'll have everything from say a 6-year-old up to a 15-year-old. They're all in the same classroom, and the teacher's working with them. It's a small, teacher to student ratio. Maybe there's 15 kids or 18 kids in their class, but you're right. Like when are you ever just with your own, your own kind of everyone you know is within 1 year of your own age. And I remember going to public high school or public school in general, and there was such a divide. It was like, oh, I'm a freshman, that person's a sophomore. And so the person that was even one grade above you, there was already this like built-in kind of social kind of ceiling or kind of wall between. Look, I'm gonna be realistic about my diet in December. It's gotta be the worst month of the year in terms of eating right. I'm inevitably gonna find myself stuffing treats, meats, and dishes into my mouth, leaving very little room for the right stuff. But I will take Balance of Nature every single day. Balance of Nature is made from whole fruit and veggie ingredients, and I will not skip taking those daily supplements. It's the one thing that I will get right because feeling good is important to me, especially in December. So, folks, join me in pushing back against the dreaded December diet crash. Get Balance of Nature today. Use my discount code SETH, that's SETH, and sign up as a new customer to get 50% off plus free shipping and their money back guarantee. So, folks, this is an awesome December discount, but you must use my promo code SETH. So call them at 800-246-8751 and use discount code SETH or order online at balanceofnature.com. Use discount code SETH to get 50% off plus free shipping. Even the different grades where you wouldn't cross over, or you're really cool. Say if you're a freshman and you were dating a sophomore, right? It was a big deal. Or
Yeah.
but likewise, if you were a senior and some freshmen show up to a party you're at, like you'd treat them like they were kind of these like, why are you here, right? Like you're just freshmen, and so it creates this social structure with, I think, look at, I think it was what, Lord of the Flies, right? Look what happens when you let
Yeah.
these social structures kind of go unchecked, and you have tribalism. You have a lot of really bad socialization that happens because of that. And so it's just it's a recipe for disaster, but I think it's an
Well, it is
intentional
a
recipe.
disaster. It is, because the students, I mean, think about it, like in business, they teach you one manager to 6 to 8 reports. And these are professionals who are paid to be there, who've, in theory could go get a job somewhere else. And you need one person to manage 8, and you have one teacher with 30. So it's the kids teaching the kids. And that's why roughly 40% of kids in public school are bullied, 30% are sexually harassed, 11% are sexually harassed by teachers. Um, so if you're, I mean, think about it, like, you don't experience that in the real world. You don't experience that at work or walking down the street or at a restaurant. So imagine sending your kids to a place where there's a 40% chance of them being bullied and a 30% chance of them being sexually harassed. And guess what? Only a 30% chance that they're going to learn to read. And you send them there for 12 years. It's insane.
It really is.
Insane.
But so what do you say to the parents? Because I've talked a lot about homeschooling, and I look at the comments and discussions, and because like what we're experiencing right now is a very broken society, not just our education system and the media,
Sure.
but even our financial system. And looking at, like what you mentioned, what $100 would buy, however long ago. I mean, it used to be like, my dad, he grew up, he was in a Catholic family. He was one of 9 kids. His dad was an engineer. His dad was in World War II, so typical baby boomer. He came back, and created all the baby boomers, right? So he came back after the war and was like, "Look, I saw so much death over there." And of course, they're Catholic, so they had no way of kind of stopping, more babies being created, right? And so he came back and just, he had 9 kids, and they lived in a 2.5 bedroom house with one bathroom, so 11 people, right?
Yeah.
But that was just the idea. But his father, though, as an engineer, could support his entire family. They owned their house. They had maybe 1 or
Mhm.
2 cars, and but nowadays, because of inflation, because of all these things that have really been screwed up with our monetary policy and everything, even to your typical middle class family can't even own a house unless either A, that they're, one of the parents is making 6 figures, or B, if
Mhm.
they're both working 2 jobs. And then when the government comes along and says, well, we offer, free childcare, et cetera, it's so easy just to think, well, I guess we can do that. But what do you say though to the parents that they want to homeschool, but they're thinking that,
Mhm.
like, they both have to work full-time jobs and that there's really no way they can homeschool. Like, how do we solve that? Because I
Right.
imagine if we could solve that equation, maybe you could double the amount of homeschooled kids in this nation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously our systems are broken, and that means we can't continue to perpetrate them to the next generation. And so that obviously means making sacrifices, and those aren't easy, and especially like you said, some of those things are just quite frankly, out of our control, it seems. And so some of the things that we're seeing is grandparents stepping in and homeschooling. Parents trying to figure out, making lifestyle choices. Like if you are a dual income, no kid, there's a pretty good chance that you are on that, making choices, not considering the future. And so trying to help them understand that, yeah, you maybe can afford a $1,200 car payment as a 26-year-old, but if you're going to have kids here in the near future, that's going to be, that's going to limit your choices. So trying to figure out, where am I today? How do we change our lifestyle to help, can we start a job at home or things like that, downgrade our house. The other thing we need to start thinking about is like for churches, especially, they need to have Christian education funds. Our church, we have all sorts of different demographics, middle class, poor, rich. Not a single kid is going to a public school in our church because we raise money for it. So we have a 3-day a week university model school out of our church. We financially support a 5-day classical Christian school that's nearby. We have on the other days of the week, we have homeschool groups that come in and use our church facility. So, and then we have a scholarship fund that we have for families that can't afford a Christian education. And so, there's things that we can just start doing to start changing mindsets, because it does no good to have 11 kids and then send them to Caesar for their education. We've got to, uh, you know, quite frankly, pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and understand that we say that the next generation, and you'll see that the next generation isn't going to have the benefits, isn't going to be improved for like the first time in history in the United States, that we're not taking a step forward in society. But what people forget is the parents and society made sacrifices in the previous generation so that the next one could take that step forward. And we have been raised in a pagan society, and it's all about me, 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 and it's all about selfishness, and what can society do for me. And it's not surprising that the next generation is going to pay for that. So, yeah, I mean, we have to, let go of our consumer mindset. I know single widowed moms that are figuring out how to homeschool, and they work 3 or 4 jobs out of the home. Maybe their church is supporting them on the side to help them pay some of those bills and things like that. So, when people say they can't afford to homeschool, but I know, at least a dozen single moms who are can't afford to homeschool, but they figure it out on a yearly basis with two, three, 4 kids. That's inspiration to me. And I say we got to think outside the box some and not think that the government has those solutions for us. And instead, we've got more wealth in the United States than we've ever had. I mean, you could be lower middle class in America and you've got more wealth than John D. Rockefeller, that you are living a better life than he ever lived. And he is the, most wealthy person to ever live in the sense of, what his dollars would be worth today on an inflationary basis. But you didn't have, you didn't have air conditioning, you didn't have TV, you didn't have, these transportation modes that we have now. And so, we've just been blinded by our consumerism, and that's not something that's gonna uh, fill our hole. It's not gonna, you can go binge shopping and feel good for a couple hours, but when that credit card bill comes, you eventually have to pay it off. And so, because our society has been living on debt and credit for so long, you have to put in austerity measures to get things back right again. And not only, you look at Argentina and all the stuff that they had to do. You need to you need to do that to your household budget in many cases. And yeah, it sucks, but if you want the next generation to be better off than you, it's something you got to do right now.
I couldn't agree more, and it's interesting because I saw, I think I forget who it was that tweeted about it, and I was looking at the conversation back and forth where someone was basically saying, talking about these grandparents that are maybe it was their own family or someone that they knew they're familiar with how basically the grandparents were very successful, had a lot of money, and their children were really struggling. They were struggling to get by, and they were trying to raise their own kids. And this one person was like, "This is really screwed up. It's really backwards." And then I saw some comments that were kind of rebuttaling it in the comments and saying, "Look, these grandparents, they've worked their whole lives to retire and to enjoy their money, and their kids need to kind of work harder." And I think it's that again, is much more of this more modern mindset because we've got a lot of friends from different cultures, say, Eastern Europe, and like the parents, especially the grandparents, like they sacrifice everything for the next generation, especially the next generations. And it's just part of the culture that, one of my good friends, his family, they're from Eastern Europe, and his mother basically kind of sacrificed everything to almost move in with them to help them raise their children so they could work and they could go out and work. But then their grandmother was always going to be there to help raise the kids. And I can see how much it's transformed that family. And of course, say, his, the grandmother, she could be retired, she could have a nice RV traveling around, going down to the Gulf, get down to the Gulf and vacationing, and they could live that lifestyle, but instead, they're choosing to continue to raise the next generations. I think that's also a big shift. It's not just the parents and like the you and I of this of this kind of these generations, they're saying, okay, hey, we're going to sacrifice to homeschool, but it's the grandparents thinking like that, and that's how my wife and I are setting ourselves up. So we're whether it's our house choices, where we're living, how we're investing, everything, we're looking at this and saying, okay, how can we have it so that as soon as we have our own grandchildren, we can basically be full time grandparents and do everything
Yeah.
possible to make sure that it's not just our kids we're looking after, but even more so their children, which I think that's again something that I think has been very lost in our society, intentionally, where now it's very common to shove your parents into a nursing home and everything. But actually, imagine the wisdom that happens there, because if you've got the
Yeah.
grandparents that are helping to raise the second and third generations following them, it's going to be a lot more difficult to destroy our culture and to destroy our traditions than what we've seen happen.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've put our most wise people and take them away from our most immature ones. And my grandparents lived with us for about 5 years when I was growing up, and of course helped relieve some of the cost of housing and food and like that on our family and cooking and things like that. And just getting time to spend time with my grandfather and my grandmother was a really special opportunity. And yeah, it makes your culture stronger. It lets you know your family's history, so you're less likely to abandon it for whatever the latest talking points are out of the universities. Um, and the Bible tells us to leave our children's children an inheritance, and so many people think monetary inheritance. And I mean, quite frankly, those things are getting inflated away. You could give your great grandkids $1 million. It's going to buy a hamburger by the time
That's true.
they're 18 years old. So give them a cultural inheritance. Give them an inheritance of family, of love, of stories, of the best things of the best, and your things that you messed up on, so that they don't follow and do the same mistakes that you made. And generational living is great. My parents live 30 minutes away. My wife's parents live 30 minutes away. They live in neighborhoods right across from each other, and just being able to be around them on a regular basis isn't just a blessing to us, because if we need a weekend away or something, you've kind of got those babysitters. But of course, they love being there and spending time with their grandkids. And yeah, you could, both of them could go live anywhere they wanted to and do whatever they wanted to. But how lonely is that when you can be spending time with the future and impacting the future?
It really is, and it's funny because I've had these conversations a lot with my own mom and said, "Look, like, how about, once you retire, we'll maybe we'll build you a little garage with an apartment on top or something." Because like, I want that, and I'd love to see a resurgence in multi-generational living where grandparents are moving in with their kids, and the thing is that when you look at these studies, I mean, there's a book I read, it was, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And it was a pretty profound book in terms of this woman that was working in, kind of she worked with palliative care and people that were really at the end of their life and understood what were their regrets. And it was never, oh, I wish I would have bought that bigger RV. I wish I would have retired earlier so I could travel. I wish I would have gone to Europe. And it was always, I wish I would have been closer to my kids. I wish I would have sacrificed career for family. And I hope that we can see that. I mean, I think obviously, our generation that, you and I think that we will be that. Like, I think that there was a massive psyop that happened with the baby boomers in the 60s and the 70s, and that was really this, I think, a very Tavistock, Marxist, influence on how to get, like, the women's liberation. Like, I don't need to be tied down to have kids. I can be a career woman, and they've really destroyed so much of what was the fabric of this culture, but I do hope that we can bring it back in. That's for sure.
Yeah, my mom says this quote, and I always attribute it to her because I'll get in trouble. But husbands sell their wives to the highest bidder and their children to the lowest bidder. In other
Wow.
words, they go get their woman to work, be a corporate slave for someone who will pay her the most, and then find who will educate them for the cheapest. And
Wow.
that's a really
Husbands.
low view of women and children.
No, but it's true though, actually, that I mean, not all of us, but yeah, that husbands sell their wives to the highest bidder and sell their kids to the lowest bidder. Incredible. Well, so, Robert, where can we follow you? Obviously, your website, classicalconversations.com. If anyone wants to learn more about your homeschool, curriculum and how that works, what's your Twitter handle? People can follow you on Twitter.
Yeah, so the Robert B Show. Love to connect with you on Twitter or X. I'm on there every day. So yeah, let's get a follow and let's get in a conversation. And yeah, classicalconversations.com. Of course, they're all social media there too. But if you go to find out more, put in your zip code. We'll actually have a local homeschooling parent, probably a mom, but there's a couple of dads that work for us that will be there to tell you all about homeschooling, tell you all about classical conversations, and help you get started today.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for what you're doing. I really believe that the work on the children is probably the most important thing we can do to correct the course of our society, as it starts with the next generation. So I appreciate what you're doing. Give your thanks to your mother, or my thanks to your mother, of course, and for what she's done and for raising you and allowing you to play the role that you're doing. And yeah, I look forward to our next conversation. And I encourage people again to follow you on Twitter. I'll put those links in the description below for the show, for your Twitter profile and for classicalconversations.com. So, Robert, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Seth. It was a lot of fun.
It was. Take care and God bless.